Welcome to If These Walls Could Talk. I'm your host and super CEO, Lindsay Liu. Joining me today is Richard Sheeler, the President of Neglia Appraisals. Over his 20-year career as an appraiser, Richard's walked into every sort of property: single-family, multifamily, condos, co-ops, HOAs, commercial properties, and even vacant land and rent studies in the New York area. Today, he shares a few of the most shocking site visits he's been a part of, including accidentally stumbling upon a witness protection program. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'd love to start with that story. I know you've got a few good ones, but maybe just give us a little bit of context into what you thought your day was going to look like before you stumbled on it.
So this was very early on in my career, and at that point, I was only taking comparable pictures. So I was out in the field that day, and I had a list of photos that I had to take, all over Brooklyn, New York. And this particular property was on my list. I had no idea that there was anything unusual about it or any craziness surrounding it. I pulled up, jumped out of the vehicle, grabbed my camera, walked to the front of the building, snapped a photo, got back in the car to take some quick notes about the property. And while I was there taking the notes, next thing I know, I look up and I have two gentlemen in suits pointing their weapons at me. "Get your hands in the air right now. Who are you? What are you doing here? Why are you taking a picture of the house?" Which, obviously rattled me to my core. But ultimately, I had to explain to them who I was, what I was doing there, produce my appraisal license, explain to them that I was using this property as a comparable in one of my reports and I need to take a photo of it. Ultimately, what I came to find out in that instance was that there was a witness in a future FBI case, and they were being stashed there before they got on the stand to testify in the case. So ultimately, it was a very scary situation, and I'm surprised I continued on, quite honestly, with appraising after something like that. But it was definitely eye-opening to the things that you can experience while you're in the field with appraising. Everyone kind of assumes that, hey, very simply, you walk in the house, you take your pictures, do your measurements, and that's typically the way it goes. But ultimately, there are some instances where you run into different situations.
Were you prepared for a situation like that with any of your training or during the licensing process? Did they make you aware?
Absolutely not. It is not something they go into in any of the training or anything. New York is its own animal. So you have, different people of different beats and different lifestyles who do things their own way. So you really never know what you're walking into. It's honestly one of the things I like most about the job is all the different things that you get to see. No two properties are ever the same. No two clients are ever the same. And no two situations requiring an appraisal are ever the same. So it's a constantly evolving and changing landscape.
That's incredible. My mind immediately goes to, I'm a big fan of like mob movies of somebody. I'm like, it's got to be East Williamsburg in Brooklyn, where, you've got someone stashed in the stash house and you've just revealed where the safe house is. And they had no idea that you were just innocently taking a photo.
Yeah, more often than not, when we take comparable photos, there's a tendency to have some questioning, let's say. A lot of times I'll have nosy neighbors come out, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you taking a picture?" Or, the looky-loo driving around and sees you, "What are you doing in the neighborhood? Why are you taking pictures?" And it's understandable. People want their safety. One thing that we run into a lot of times, if there are kids out playing on the block and we're taking a photo, parents get concerned, and completely understandable. And, I do my best to take my time and explain to them, no kids are in the photos. I'll even show them the photo if necessary. Last thing we want to do is have any concerned parents about their children's welfare, just due to a simple appraisal photo.
Has Google Maps changed any of this for you now that they drive around and take photo and video of everything?
So I wish I could say yes, but unfortunately, it's a requirement by most clients that we have to take an actual photo, do a physical inspection of a comparable from the street to make sure it's physically there and what we think it is. So, we do have to drive out and go to each one of the comparables in the report and take a photo and make sure it is what it is.
Do you still take photos today, or do you got someone else that you've put into the field?
So right now I do not have a trainee in the office. When I do have a trainee, that is where they start. That is the first very simple task that we give them. But as of right now, I am back out in the field taking my own photos, unfortunately.
All right. Well, for your future trainees, this episode will be part of their training program on what to expect.
Absolutely. And regarding that, the inspection process too is somewhere that sometimes we bump into issues or strange different things. I'm sure you can imagine a hoarder house being an interesting inspection, and I've had my fair share of those.
I was going to say, I'm sure you're not imagining that.
No, oh no. And there are different types of hoarders I've learned over the years. There are ones who try to be neat with their mess, and they stack everything up in nice, neat piles, and they create, a pathway for you to get through everything. And then there are others where it's just everywhere. I did a property years back out in Queens where when we opened up the door, it was probably about hip high with stuff just everywhere. And you couldn't walk in the house. There was no path. There was nothing. So to get into the property, you literally had to climb up on the stuff, at which point, your head's about to hit the ceiling. So you're bent over in the property trying to walk through. Ultimately, after getting a couple of steps inside, I realized that was a health and safety issue. And we couldn't get inside on that one. And we had to do that one from the street.
Wow. How does that affect how you evaluate and appraise a property? Because obviously the contents, in a case of hoarding, right, that's a little different. You've got like load-bearing issues and things like that to be concerned about, but they're typically not things that you would consider, right? So how does that affect your process there?
So in a house where we can't do a full inspection, we would scour public records, get as much information about the property as we could. Then we're also going to look at whatever resources we can for any prior listings or anything that might have some sort of interior photos of the property to give us an idea of room count, layout, and condition as of the effective date of the appraisal. Lastly, we would want somebody to interview that would have knowledge of the condition of that property as of the effective date of the appraisal. So a lot of times we do work where we're doing date of death appraisals and they're retrospective. Somebody's passed away, the house has been sitting for a while, etc., and we go in and do the appraisal. Most of the time we're able to see what is there physically at the time of the appraisal. Because it's retrospective, we need somebody to tell us if anything had changed between the time that we were in the property and that retrospective date that we're trying to bring the value up as of. So ultimately, that interviewing that person is really paramount in the process to get as much information as we can. Eventually you have to do the job with the data that you have. And, we can employ extraordinary assumptions in the report where we would, based on information that we were given, we can extrapolate an assumption about the condition of the house. And we would explain that in the report and explain that the opinion of value is based on that extraordinary assumption. And if that assumption is proven to be false, then the value contained in the report would have to be revisited.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I once lived next door to a cat hoarder, which, as an animal person, you're watching, and there's unfortunately not much you can do if they own the property. There's not much you can do. You can, we tried every trick in the book, and everyone was like, well, unless they let you in or unless you see actual physical abuse happening, there's nothing you can do. But the smell. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. With cat hoarding, the smell was something else. So, I often wonder, how would that affect, I guess, I don't know. Could you ever renovate that smell out?
So there are ways to mitigate smells with, air ionizers and things of that nature. And sometimes I've seen it be successful. Other times I haven't. Ultimately, that will definitely affect the purchase price. It's very hard from an appraisal standpoint to quantify the effect that a smell will have on the value. There's no mathematical formula that I can apply to get down to that one.
This one was bad.
So ultimately, in situations like that, what we would want to do is have 2 or 3 estimates from people who could come in and attempt to remediate that odor. And we would rely on those estimates for the cost to cure. And we would apply that in the appraisal report to, get down to the final value. But, to that point, we do a lot of work in my office for a government agency that deals with disposing of properties when owners die intestate. So a lot of times we're the first people in there after the properties have been sitting for several years. One particular time comes to mind, and this is probably a good 7 to 10 years ago, and it was an industrial property in Brooklyn, and we had gone there, and the investigator from the city agency had been there already, so I assumed the property was good to go and able to be walked through. I was accompanied by that same investigator, and we went through, and there was no electricity, no lights, so we're walking around with flashlights, and we're doing everything we can. Go down into the basement to see the utilities. Everything looked fine. We complete the inspection, and I step out onto the sidewalk, and all of a sudden I realize I'm kind of itchy. What's going on? So I unbuttoned my shirt and saw fleas crawling up and down my white t-shirt. I was completely covered.
You were covered.
Covered.
Just from doing a walkthrough.
Just from the walkthrough. I'm pretty sure they came from the basement, but there's no way to know for sure. Ultimately, I freaked out, obviously. Who wants to bring fleas home with them, So, picture a 40-year-old plus man on the side of the road in Brooklyn who stripped down to his boxer shorts, left all of his clothes on the street corner, and got in the car and frantically called his wife, "You need to go how to get rid of fleas on you. It's right now."
All I'm missing is the garbage can on fire in the corner with your clothes in that picture.
There you go. But that was fun. I had to come home and, take a tomato bath, and then they tell you to soak in a bath with dishwashing soap in it, and that will get rid of all the fleas. So I tried every home remedy I could find, and thankfully it worked, and I did not have the fleas, and they did not permeate my residence. But it was definitely one that'll stick with me forever, to the point where nowadays I carry a paper hazmat suit in the trunk of my car. Just in case there's any questions, I am suiting up because I am not going through that again.
So the next time the FBI pulls you over, they're going to be like, there is something suspect here. What is this suit for? What's going on?
No duct tape, no shovel.
Like, just the suit. We're fine.
Just the suit.
I have never heard of the tomato bath thing. I've heard of that for skunk smells. Like if
it was, you know what, I had heard of it, and a couple people said it doesn't work, in the comments, and a couple people said it did work. I figured, at this point, chance. I'm going to give it a shot. Yeah, what do I have to lose, Oh
my gosh. Well, in New York, the bed bugs, that's another thing I'm sure you have to think about. When do you decide? Because, things like that are actually not often related to cleanliness, either fleas a little bit, but like bed bugs, they travel. And so how do you know when the hazmat suit needs to come out?
I'd rather err on the side of caution, quite honestly. With specific to bed bugs, I'm an appraiser. I'm an expert in valuation. I'm not an expert in bed bugs. I'm not an expert in fleas or FBI witness protection programs or anything of that. So, if there was a situation where I had any question or, any red flag while I'm in the property, I would request that they get a professional who is licensed in that field to come through and do a walkthrough and provide a written opinion as to the situation, whether it be bed bugs or damage on the wall or a plumbing leak or a roof leak or whatever the case may be. And we would also ask them to opine to a cost to cure whatever situation was there. And again, similar to how we discussed earlier, we would rely on those other experts' opinion, and we would apply that in the appraisal report.
I have a quick question. How do you build back in the situation of like you basically just had to deal with walking into an infestation? Are you able to charge for the remediation of that? Or is that just a hazard of the job?
So yeah, that's a cost of doing business the way I see it, unfortunately. That I can't see how I can bill the client after the fact for something that, may or may not have been present. They may or may not have even known about it. I'd say 99.9% of the time we have agreed upon a fixed fee prior to us coming out. So I'm of the opinion that it would be bad business to go back after that initial agreement and say, hey, this took place. I need XYZ dollars more. If it was an egregious situation and it couldn't be prevented, obviously we'd have to address it. But more often than not, I'm going to take that on the chin and chalk it up to cost of doing business.
Just a few cans of tomato juice and some Dawn dish soap, right?
Right? Doesn't hurt anybody. Well, we also had to have the car bombed afterwards because I wasn't sure if anybody got off me or into the car.
They
But,
jump.
oh yeah, and it's always fun. Another story that comes to mind that I want to tell you about real quick. Also, taking those comparable photos, you never know what you're going to see or who's going to see you. I was appraising a mixed-use building, and again, this was in Brooklyn, and I got out to take the comp photo, and it was a storefront on the first floor, 2 stories of residential apartments above. I snap the picture and get back in the car, and as I'm walking to the car, the proprietor of the store came out with a machete. And what are you taking a picture of the store for? And started walking towards me with the machete. Obviously, I did not want to deal with him or have any types of communication with him, so I got in my car and took off. Subsequently came out in the news a couple of months later that that store had a very large marijuana grow operation going on in the basement. And I'm sure I was not the first person taking a picture of his store based on the time between when I was there and when, the law enforcement got involved. But that was definitely something that also sticks out in my mind. It's not very often we get chased with machetes, even in Brooklyn. But yeah, it's always interesting. There's always something out there.
Another close call with law enforcement.
I'm noticing a theme here, right?
What would you prefer? Another set of FBI agents that were staking out the place, or the proprietor with the machete? You pick.
I'd have to go FBI agents in that one. They were a little more level-headed, and I was able to communicate with them.
Do you think that there was a chance that you actually could have uncovered something in the appraisal because of energy use or, any of the survey tools that you use?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There is a chance that it could be flagged via an appraisal. The appraiser would notice a spike in electric costs or heating costs or whatever the case may be. That being said, it wouldn't be something that would get out to anyone or be flagged for anyone because unless I physically saw the grow operation, I wouldn't know what caused that spike in the electric or that spike in the heating, etc. I would just report it and address it appropriately in the report. So while it might be a red flag, it wouldn't connect the dots unless there was some sort of visual confirmation.
Or I guess a smell, maybe.
Fair enough.
You seem to have a pretty good nose. I don't know. Well, funny story. A friend of mine just told me this past weekend that one of their tenants, they had found out from a neighbor, the tenants were not even residing in the property. They had turned it entirely into a grow house.
Oh, wow.
So I guess, the power of doing a regular walkthrough. Checking in on your property.
One of the reasons why us as appraisers are required to do an interior physical inspection of the property, make sure nothing illegal is going on. Check that box.
Sometimes a little harder to check. I don't know.
Indeed.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing these stories with us today. If anybody would like to get an actual appraisal completed, how can they get in touch with you?
We can be found on the web at www.neglia.com. That's Neglia, Neglia.com. You can call us in the office at 718-331-2122. And you can also email us at appraisals@neglia.com. That's appraisals with an S, APPRAISALS@neglia.com.
Amazing. Thank you, Richard. Well, that's today's episode of If These Walls Could Talk. Super is the AI-powered communication and workflow tool for property managers. To learn more about Super, visit us at www.hiresuper.com. To share a story you have for a future episode, email us at hello@hiresuper.com.